Welcome to Digital Marketing Mastery Lecture 9, Calculating ROI, or as I would call it, ROO, or Return on Objectives. This is the last and final lecture prior to your presentations to be given next week. We have several final things to cover prior to your final presentations next week. The first of which is remembering the first assignment, your brand. What is your brand? What is your brand objective? And what does it have to do with your digital plans, campaigns, scope, and calculating the return on objectives of your digital plan? The second of which, how are you going to determine your brand valuation, or how you measure your ROO or your ROI? Let's return next to your benchmark data, right, which will serve as a very good compare and contrast between your analytics and what you present as your ROI. And then we'll have some final details about your final assignment in the last slide. The traditional methods for calculating brand value generally make assumptions about the impact that the branding is having on some aspect of your sales. Many of these models are highly complex and not very easy to take action from. So what we need to build is actually a framework that allows us to see the value of each of the pieces of our branding, and from there gain insights that can be actioned to improve things. Now, how do we build this? How do we define brand value and valuation? So what I'm suggesting here is that we should be able to calculate the value of every bit of our marketing activity and look at it, or look how it is contributing to the bottom line, or see how it's contributing to the bottom line. Now this, I will qualify, may not be 100% accurate and 100% a perfect approach to this problem, but it is a lot closer to reality than how we've been doing things up until now. And many of you remember the days prior to digital marketing where measurement and measuring communications activities was a very imperfect science, and we've gotten a lot closer. Now you can actually, to that point, measure everything that happens online. So if you only market online and you make a sale online with, say, a credit card, then you can measure most things. Now what it doesn't take into account is a scenario such as, and I'll give you an example, the only reason your customer searched that or found you on Google in the first place was because their friend told them about you in the pub or the bar the night before. Now try to measure that. So, for example, while we still have all these kinds of problems with digital, we can nonetheless now measure a lot more than just pure online transactions. Well, let's return to one of our first lectures. Number one, what was the point of your campaign? What was your current state? And what did you choose to have as your desired state? Number two, how well have you marketed your brand differentiation, right? Or what I'll call here, it's often also called the USP, or unique selling point, also known as your brand differentiator. Now, how is that measured against your benchmark data? And number three, your metrics should include at least three comparative forms of analytics. Number one, your share of voice. Number two, your audience engagement. And number three, the initial efforts of your micro-targeting. The compare and contrast of these efforts will help you define your brand and the valuation in accordance with your digital marketing strategy. That said, in order to do any effective digital branding, we do also need to understand our potential audience's journey and understand how this can be influenced, improved, and essentially lead to our desired outcomes. To do this, we need to measure what is important and learn from this and improve. Now, traditionally, this is called measuring beyond the quote-unquote last click. Now, analytics allows us to see activities on our websites and our apps, where that traffic has come from, essentially. It also allows us to track our desired outcomes, at least to some extent, as we talked about earlier. And what we need to be clear at from the outset is that there are limitations on analytics and what it can tell us. To understand that, we generally need to understand the web analytics as a whole. So generally, web analytics takes a last-click approach, what I mentioned earlier. This means we look at some form of activity, such as a download, and see where the traffic came from that directly preceded the download. What this doesn't tell us are all the steps that people took before the last step. Now, just because I came to your website from a search engine and downloaded something doesn't mean the search engine was solely responsible for the download. Now, I may have visited your website 10 times before from multiple sources over an extended period of time. This is what we really need to understand. Now, thankfully, by using some relatively new features and tools like, and some of you are familiar with this, Google Analytics, this has become a lot easier. Now let's talk about the chart. The chart includes the first and foremost, your business objective. Now your primaries are things that we can monitor online that are as close as possible to our business objectives. If you sell online with a credit card facility, then your primary or your goal or your business objective will be your sale. However, if you are looking for leads, it may be forms submitted or calls made to a web advertised telephone number. It could be the registration for an event or the download of a very relevant piece of content or something you put online, perhaps an infographic that you made from your content marketing strategy. Now, these are not our absolute business objectives in many cases, but rather the closest things we can come up with online to achieving these. Now, indicators are the things we can measure online that impact how many primaries are completed. In order to get a filled-in lead form, I will need website traffic. And in order to get that traffic, I need a traffic source. One such source would be, say, a search engine or a social media site. For the search engine traffic, I need to be ranking for certain search terms. For social media, I need an engaged audience. Now, all of these things can be broken down into what we call indicators. And indicators feed your primary goals. Your primary goals feed your business objectives. Next slide, please. On the last slide, we talked about indicators. But let's talk a little bit about the different types of indicators. You can get indicators specifically from search engines and social media, essentially web indicators that are based off of your content and your distribution. Some indicators that you can include that are relevant to your primary goals that you can actually measure are, number one, traffic from a search engine. Number two, rankings for search terms in search engines. Number three, your page authority. And number four, the volume of searches for a specific search term. Now, there are also indicators and data sources for social traffic. One of the indicators are you can measure traffic from a social platform. You can also measure the percentage of engaged users. And lastly, you can measure the size of an audience. All of these contribute as indicators to your primary goal and your eventual business objective. That said, there are still some gaps. Now, how do we fill in these gaps? Some questions to ask yourself. Does positive engagement actually lead to sales? Now, we assume so, but we don't actually know. It's hard to prove. Another question. Does more people being aware of your brand values mean that you sell more? We assume so, but not necessarily. Once again, we will try to fill in these gaps by demonstrating how measurement and asking these questions can actually try to provide answers. Now, one of the most important things to actually do is to abandon volume-based metrics. And we'll talk about that in a later slide. Another thing to do is to remember what you benchmarked in our earlier lectures, right? If we talk about abandoning the idea that a web hit equals sales, how can we actually determine, right, that our desired outcomes were affected by our digital marketing campaign? Now, to do so, we need to re-examine how we look at our benchmarks, because a lot of what we collected is web hit, audience analysis, and raw numbers. How can we convert them into what we call desired outcomes for a given campaign? Now, I've included what we haven't covered in class, a how-to listing and instruction basis on how to go through Google Analytics. That is downloadable from your Week 9 folder. Right, now, some of what Google Analytics is doing is available on a lot of different tool sources, one of which it would behoove me to tell you is behavior-based analytics. Now, behavior-based analytics, as you can probably guess, are behavior reports that highlight what users are doing on your site and which of your content is actually the most popular. They're also called content reports, or what they were previously called content reports. They will also show you how long users are staying on particular pages and look at things such as bounce and exit rate. Now, a bounce rate is someone entering and exiting a website on the same page, and an exit is just the final page on the website visit. Now, something important to note about bounce rates specifically is that not all bounces are equal. Now, we would generally assume a bounce is a bad thing. Someone leaves your website. For example, someone arriving at your website from a search engine lands on your homepage and not liking the look of it, then leaves. This is called a bounce. However, someone bookmarking your blog because they read it every week lands on your blog page, and reads it for, say, 25 minutes, then leaves is also called a bounce, right? But they've already spent 25 minutes there. The visitor still entered and exited your website on the same page. Therefore, a bounce isn't always a bad thing if the user has gotten what he or she wanted, right? Another useful tool to understand is, and specific to behavior reporting, is called in-page analytics. This allows you to see your web pages and to navigate from an individual page and see particular data for that page. It doesn't currently give you the option to view your site as if on a mobile device, but I think that this feature is in production. Now, this class covers the topic of analytics, but it does not dive into the full spectrum of what analytics can do for your digital marketing strategy. Now, that's actually covered in another course here at UCLA, which I highly recommend. However, I have attached here, as well as in the course material for this week, a set of training videos on how to set up and understand your Google Analytics strategy with regard to calculating ROI. If you have time this week, I highly recommend going through it. Let's return to talking about ROI, or ROO, or what we call desired outcome. Now, ROI is a measure of the monetary benefits obtained by an organization over a specified amount of time for a given investment in, say, a program or a campaign. Now, ROI can be used to both justify a planned investment or to evaluate the extent to which the desired return was achieved. Now, ROI is often calculated by making estimates or obtaining measurements of the costs and benefits associated with an initiative. The analytics, or desired audience outcomes, and ROI, in this case, go hand in hand. And you should customize them based on your business goals in relation to your audience. Now, ROI, I will say, is more than just the simple aggregation of successful tactics. Return on objectives indicates that specific or specified customer behaviors, right, what you've desired your customers to do, right, you have successfully influenced or changed those behaviors from a current state to a desired state. Now, outcome-focused planning, which is what it's being called now, generally uses business outcomes as its starting point and reverse engineers communications tactics from there. Now, outcome-focused planning ensures that communications tactics have demonstrable and defensible impact on a business partner's outcomes. Now, let's return to an earlier concept that I introduced called abandoning volume-based metrics. And one of the key problems with looking at volume-based metrics is that they don't give you an indication of what success actually looks like. So you may feel that getting 10,000 followers on your Facebook page is a great success. However, if your nearest competitor has 500,000 followers, it's suddenly a different story. Now, volume is prevalent in social media measurement, but also in digital channels as well. We look at things such as how many emails we've sent, or the number of page impressions, or unique visitors to our website. And these are not so much a measurement of success or failure, but rather indicating factors that can lead to actual desired outcomes or primaries. One such example of an outcome-based metric is the concept of conversion-based marketing. Now, the act of a conversion-based marketing activity is the act of actually converting site visitors into paying customers. But that said, conversion metrics can actually measure something other than a sale. Now, conversion metrics or outcome-based metrics are the single most important set of reports within analytics when looking at your digital branding or your digital campaign, because it is the most closely aligned with your business objectives. A conversion is someone actually completing one of your online goals or primaries. A goal is a user doing something you want them to do. Now, that could be making a purchase, filling in a lead generation form, clicking on an ad, listening to a podcast, or any number of things that may be aligned with your end business objectives. You can set up these goals within a lot of tools, admin functionality of analytics, and specifically Google Analytics. And it's actually worth understanding and putting a little bit of time into understanding the different types of goals you can set up. One example would be a URL destination or a visitor getting to a particular page. Right? Increasing your visit duration. Right? You may decide that, say, someone is staying on your site for a certain period of time and you want to increase it. Right? This can help with awareness, for example. Pages per visit, you may decide that someone is looking at a certain number of pages on your site, and it's a goal to increase the page visits. Right? An event, let's say an event is happening. An event is something that, say, happens within a page, such as someone clicking a link to an external website or filling out a field or a form. Right? And once these goals are set up, right, you can set up your goal reports and indicate how your digital marketing strategy will reach your ROO. Now, beyond ROI and ROO, it is very important to measure and report out progress. This is important so you can fine-tune your strategy and targeting for your own good, but it's also useful to manage the expectations of your business partner. Now, the above is an example of a section from a worksheet I've posted under week 9, and it includes a sample progress report to achieving your desired outcome. In moving forward beyond this class, I invite you to explore different ways of managing expectations and reporting progress to your business partners. Now, typically, I'm invited to do this somewhat monthly, right? And it helps people track the progress and move along your goals to your desired outcomes with you. Now, because we're coming on the final weeks of class, the homework and everything that I post for reading and review is optional, except for what I want you to post to Canvas this week. So for optional homework, I've actually posted the course material on how to set up Google Analytics. For real homework, what I want you to post is your actual ROI slide to this week's discussion board. I want you to show me how you plan to measure the success of your campaign in one slide. Now, this is the last slide that I'm going to ask you to do for your digital marketing strategy. And I've also posted samples from other students from previous years in this course so that you have a baseline to work from. Now, our next class, our March 9th class, will be an optional in-class office hours. Now, during this class, I will dedicate time to helping individuals who are struggling or just who need time to work through some issues on their final presentations with an instructor or with some other people. There won't be any lecture, so it's not a required class. That will be our last formal class, and our final presentation is due by 12 noon on March 16th, and I would like you to email that to my personal email at elizabeth.spies@gmail.com. This will also be posted and emailed to you, and I've enjoyed our classes.